There's a man in this town who collects things. Not coins. Not art. He collects people. And he never lets them go. That's what my grandmother told me on the summer nights when the power would flicker and the cicadas screamed in the trees. I was a child then, too young to understand the weight of her trembling voice. She would rock in her chair, eyes fixed on the dark fields beyond the window, and whisper about him, the man in the mansion on the hill. Most kids grow up with ghost stories, with monsters hiding under their beds. But in my town, we grew up with the collector. The mansion sat half a mile beyond the edge of town, a sprawling Gothic structure with broken spires and iron gates so rusted they looked like dried blood. Nobody lived there, they said. Nobody could. But sometimes, late at night, a single light would flicker in the attic window, as though someone was still inside. And then there were the disappearances. The first I remember was Mrs. Calloway, the school librarian. One day she was helping us with book reports, the next, she was gone. Then it was a farmer, a waitress, a teenager on his bike. Every year or two, someone else would vanish, leaving behind nothing but silence. The sheriff always called it runaways or bad luck, but we all knew better. We knew it was him. Even as an adult, I couldn't shake the story. I left town for years, college, a job, relationships, but something kept pulling me back. When my grandmother died, I returned to sort her things, and that's when I found it, a diary tucked into the false bottom of her sewing box. The diary wasn't hers. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, nothing like her neat cursive. The entries were short, but they all repeated the same thing. He watches me. He knows my name. He says I belong in his collection. The last entry chilled me. If anyone finds this, don't go to the mansion. Please. Don't look in the glass room. I should have burned it, locked it away, anything to avoid what came next. But curiosity is a sickness, and I've always been infected. That night, I drove out to the mansion. The gates creaked open easier than I expected, like they'd been waiting. The driveway stretched on forever, lined with dead trees that clawed at the sky. My headlights caught glimpses of movement in the branches, but every time I stopped, there was nothing. The mansion loomed ahead, a black silhouette against the half-moon sky. Windows gaped like open mouths. My chest tightened, but my legs moved anyway, carrying me up the steps. The front door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and something sweeter, decay masked with perfume. The foyer was enormous, lined with portraits whose eyes followed me no matter where I stood. Cobwebs clung to chandeliers, and dust coated the floor like snow. I should have turned back. I know that now. But something drew me deeper. I wandered through hallways that seemed to stretch too long, staircases that curled into impossible directions. The mansion didn't feel abandoned, it felt staged, as if every broken chair and draped sheet had been placed with purpose. Then I found it. A door at the end of a narrow hall, painted black. My grandmother's diary echoed in my head, "Don't look in the glass room." Which is exactly why I opened it. The room beyond was massive, circular, with high vaulted ceilings. The walls were made entirely of glass cases, row after row, stretching from floor to ceiling. And inside each case was a person. At first I thought they were mannequins. They stood so still, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, faces pale and expressionless. But then I saw their eyes, wide, glossy, alive. Their chests rose and fell ever so slightly, like they were breathing through invisible straws. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. I stumbled back, gagging. My hand hit something cold behind me. When I turned, I nearly screamed. It was him. Tall, thin, draped in a black coat that reached the floor. His face was pale, stretched too tightly, his smile far too wide. He didn't speak right away. He just studied me, like a scientist examining a specimen. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper that filled the entire room. "I knew you'd come." My blood froze. What is this?" He tilted his head, smile never faltering. "My collection. Every piece is precious. Every soul has a place. And now, he stepped closer, his cold hand brushing my cheek. So do you. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs. The figures in the glass cases all turned their eyes toward me at once. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Staring. And then, one of them moved. A woman pressed her hands against the glass, lips mouthing words I couldn't hear. But I understood. Run. For a moment, I couldn't move. The woman's palms pressed flat against the glass, her breath fogging the pain as she mouthed the same word again and again. Run. 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 My mind screamed at me to obey, but my body felt anchored to the spot, tethered by the collector's presence. His smile, though thin and bloodless, was impossibly strong, like a hook embedded deep in my chest, pulling me toward him. The figures in the glass were awake now. I could see it in their trembling hands, their widening eyes. They weren't lifeless dolls, they were prisoners. Every glass case hummed faintly, a low vibration that seemed to reverberate inside my bones. It was like standing in the middle of 100 heartbeats, none of them my own. You see, the collector whispered, stepping closer. His coat swayed around him as though it were alive. Every town has its history, its secrets, its offerings. But I preserve what would otherwise fade. I save them. The world forgets people too easily, but I do not. His eyes glisten with a strange hunger. Once I add you, you'll never be forgotten either. You'll live forever in my care. I forced my legs to move, stumbling backward toward the door. My hand groped for the knob, but when I turned it, nothing happened. The handle wouldn't budge. The collector tilted his head, amused. You cannot leave once you've seen the collection. That is the rule. Something inside me snapped then, some primal instinct overriding my fear. I hurled my body against the door with all the strength I had. It burst open with a groan of old hinges, and I staggered into the hall. My shoes pounded against the dusty wood floors as I ran blindly, heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, I heard him laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was soft, almost tender, like a parent watching a child play hide and seek. Run, little one, his voice echoed through the hallways. It makes the capture sweeter. I tore through the mansion, halls folding into each other like a maze designed to trap me. Every corner led to another corridor that looked exactly like the last. Portraits of strangers lined the walls, their painted eyes sharp with disapproval. I couldn't shake the feeling that the faces in the frames were the same ones I had just seen trapped behind glass. The air grew colder the deeper I ran. My breath came out in white puffs. The walls began to glisten as though wet, and a faint mist clung to the floor. My footsteps sounded louder, echoing back to me unnaturally delayed, as though someone else were running just one pace behind. I skidded around a corner and nearly tripped over something lying in the hallway. A shoe. A woman's red pump, scuffed and worn, abandoned in the middle of the floor. I crouched to grab it, but the leather was still warm, as if it had just been taken off. That's when I heard it, breathing. Not mine. Heavy, labored, right above me. I tilted my head back and saw a face peering down from the ceiling, pressed against the wood beams, eyes bloodshot and mouth twisted in a silent scream. Before I could react, the face vanished, sucked into the cracks like smoke. Panic clawed at my throat. I ran again, faster, legs burning. Every door I tried was locked, every staircase seemed to spiral back where I started. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was alive, shifting around me, herding me like cattle towards some unseen destination. Finally, I burst into a wide chamber lined with curtains of deep crimson. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, a single object gleamed under the weak light of a chandelier, a glass dome. Inside was a small figurine, perfectly crafted, its details so fine it seemed almost alive. I stepped closer. My stomach turned. The figurine was me. Not just any me, but me in this very moment, face twisted in fear, mouth half open as if screaming, one arm outstretched as though I were still running. My knees buckled. I stumbled back, crashing into the curtains. The velvet parted, revealing more pedestals hidden in the shadows. Each held a glass dome. Each dome held a figurine. A farmer holding a pitchfork. A librarian clutching a book. A boy with a bicycle. Every missing person from town. Frozen. Preserved. Perfectly captured in their final moment of terror. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook violently, my chest constricting as though the air itself had turned against me. You understand now, don't you? The collector's voice drifted into the chamber like smoke, though I couldn't see him. They thought they could leave. They thought they were free. But every soul must be displayed. Every piece belongs. His words slithered into my ears, poisonous and irresistible. My eyes darted back to the figurine of myself. Its expression had changed. The tiny mouth was no longer screaming, it was smiling. That was when the chandelier above creaked. Dust rained down as something heavy shifted in the shadows above. Slowly, I looked up. And there he was. The collector clung to the ceiling like a spider, limbs too long, coat hanging downward like a black shroud. His pale face was inches from mine, upside down, smiling wider than ever. "Don't worry," he whispered. "The glass is waiting for you." Before I could scream, the chandelier snapped. The room plunged into darkness. When the chandelier crashed, the sound was deafening, a metallic shriek followed by the thunder of glass scattering across the floor. Shards skittered like insects into the corners, some embedding themselves into the wood with a hiss. Darkness swallowed everything. The only light came from the faint glow of the figurines under their glass domes, each one casting a sickly halo that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. I froze, listening. For a moment, there was silence, heavy and absolute, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Then came the sound, soft at first, like cloth brushing against stone. A dragging. A scraping. The collector was moving in the dark. My chest tightened. I backed away slowly, trying to keep my breath shallow, afraid even the smallest sound would betray me. But the floorboards groaned beneath my weight, loud and accusing. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tasting copper. Blood. I'd bitten my lip without realizing it. Shoo, his voice came from nowhere and everywhere, echoing through the chamber. It was gentle, almost kind. "You'll wake the others. They don't like to be disturbed." I swallowed hard, my eyes darting from one glowing figurine to another. Each little face stared at me, unblinking, their tiny smiles widening the longer I looked. It was impossible, but I could swear they were moving, shifting inside the glass like they were trying to lean closer. Panic surged. I bolted. My feet crunched over broken glass, slicing into my shoes, but I didn't care. I barreled through the curtains at the edge of the room, pushing into another hallway that seemed impossibly long. The air was colder here, damp and metallic, and every step sent echoes bouncing down the corridor like ghostly footsteps chasing me. I didn't stop until I reached a door at the far end. My hands trembled as I pushed it open, half expecting it to be locked like the others. But it swung wide with a long groan. The room beyond was worse than the glass chamber. Rows of display cases filled the space, each one containing something far more grotesque than figurines. Inside the cases were human forms, full-sized, preserved in uncanny stillness. Some were standing, some sitting, others curled in positions of despair. Their eyes were open, wide with horror, and though their bodies didn't move, their chests rose and fell in shallow, mechanical rhythm. I staggered forward, pressing my hand against the glass of one case. The woman inside blinked. Her lips parted, a soundless plea escaping into the void. My stomach churned as I realized these weren't just displays, they were alive. Every missing person, entombed in glass, frozen but conscious, trapped in their final moment of fear. My grandmother's diary came back to me then, every word written in that frantic hand, "Don't look in the glass room." I stumbled backward, my heart threatening to burst. The air grew thicker, heavier, like breathing through wet cloth. And then I heard the sound again, his footsteps, slow and deliberate, each one measured like the ticking of a clock. "You've seen them," the collector said, his voice drifting closer. Do you understand now? They are safe here. Preserved. Forever admired. Isn't that what we all want? To never be forgotten? I pressed myself against the nearest wall, my nails clawing at the wallpaper as I searched desperately for another exit. The wallpaper itself seemed to ripple beneath my touch, the patterns of faded roses shifting like they were alive. You don't belong out there, he whispered. You belong in here. In my care. With the others. Look at them, so still, so perfect. And soon, you will join them. You will thank me, in time. No, the word tore from my throat, weak and hoarse. I won't. His laugh was soft, almost pitying. You think you have a choice? The glass around me began to hum, a low vibration that rattled my teeth. One by one, the eyes of the trap turned toward me, every figure pressing their hands against the glass as if begging to be freed, or warning me of what was coming. The vibration grew louder, sharper, until it was a shriek inside my skull. And then the lights in the room flickered. For the briefest second, I saw him. He was standing no more than 3 feet away, his pale face glowing in the sickly light, eyes black as pits. His smile stretched impossibly wide, splitting his face as though it might tear apart. When the light flickered again, he was gone. I ran. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but still I ran, shoving through door after door, corridors twisting like intestines, each one leading deeper instead of out. My legs felt heavy, my skin clammy, my heart beat a frantic drum. Finally, I collapsed against a door and pushed it open. It was a staircase. A narrow, spiraling descent that plunged into darkness. I didn't care where it led, up meant back to him. Down meant maybe, just maybe, escape. I descended, each step groaning under my weight. The air grew colder still, until I could see my breath fogging before me. Water dripped from the stone walls, echoing into the abyss below. At last, the stairs ended at a heavy iron door. My fingers slipped on the damp handle as I forced it open. The hinges screeched in protest, the sound so loud I winced, sure he would hear it. Inside was a cavernous space. Rows upon rows of glass cases stretched into the distance, far more than I had seen upstairs. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Each one contained a figure, preserved like a macabre museum exhibit. Some wore clothes decades out of style. Some had faces I recognized from old newspaper clippings, names whispered by elders when they thought children weren't listening. This wasn't just the missing from our town. This was generations of them. People from everywhere. People who had been forgotten by the world but remembered here. The collector's voice floated down the stairwell behind me, soft and certain. You've gone far enough. My legs locked, my heart hammering in my chest. Slowly, against every instinct screaming otherwise, I turned back toward the stairs. And there he was. Standing at the top, framed by the faint light from above, his shadow stretching long across the steps. You've seen the truth, he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of inevitability. There is no leaving now. You've been chosen. The collection has already made space for you. Something inside me broke then, not with fear, but with rage. My fists clenched, my jaw tightened. If this monster wanted me in his glass, he would have to drag me there himself. But as I turned back toward the endless rows of cases, my blood froze. One of the glass cases at the front stood empty. Its door hung open, waiting. And carved into the stone pedestal beneath it was a single word. My name. My name carved into the stone pedestal froze me where I stood. The letters were perfect, etched with surgical precision, as though someone had taken days to carve them into the rock. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't look away. I'd expected to see more strangers, more forgotten souls, but not me. Not this. The empty case loomed, glass door wide open like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. A faint mist curled from its edges, creeping along the floor toward my feet. It smelled faintly of iron and flowers, sweet and metallic, the perfume of rot hidden beneath something beautiful. I stepped back instinctively, but the case seemed to lean forward, as if the air itself were pulling me toward it. "No," I whispered, my voice weak against the cavernous silence. "This isn't real. It can't be." "Oh, it's real," came the collector's voice, echoing down the stairwell. His tone was patient, calm, as if speaking to a frightened child. "You see, every collection must remain complete. A missing piece diminishes the whole. And I've waited so very long for you." I turned, pressing my back against the pedestal, scanning the endless rows of trapped souls. Their eyes followed me, every one of them. Some were wet with tears, streaking down frozen cheeks. Others glared with fury, fists pounding silently against glass that would never break. And a few smiled, serene and glassy-eyed, as if they had accepted their fate, or perhaps forgotten who they once were. "I won't go in there," I said, louder now, though my voice trembled. "You can't make me." The collector's laugh slid down the walls like oil, coating every corner of the cavern. "Can I?" "You misunderstand, child. I don't take. I invite. And in the end, you always accept." His words sank into me, sticky and heavy. A memory surfaced, unbidden. My grandmother's voice, trembling as she tucked me in during those stormy nights. "Never look in the glass room. Never let him speak to you too long. That's how he gets inside." I shook my head violently, trying to shove the memory away, but it was too late. His words had wormed into my mind, curling there like roots. The ground beneath me shuddered, a faint vibration like the purr of some enormous beast. The rows of glass cases seemed to shift, rearranging themselves. The faces inside blurred and flickered, some changing to people I knew, neighbors, classmates, even my grandmother. My stomach dropped. Her face appeared in one of the nearest cases, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Her eyes pleaded with me. "No," I whispered again, stumbling backward. "You're dead. You've been dead for months. This isn't you. This isn't real." The collector stepped into the chamber at last, emerging from the shadows of the stairwell. His tall figure filled the space, his coat dragging across the floor like a living shadow. He moved slowly, deliberately, his pale face lit by the glow of the glass. His eyes were bottomless, reflecting not light but absence. "They all said the same thing," he murmured, gliding closer. "They fought. They denied. But in time, they understood. The world forgets you. The world erases you. But here," he gestured to the rows of cases, his long fingers pale and elegant, "you are eternal." His words made my skin crawl. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if the air had thickened, solidifying around me, pinning me in place. My gaze was pulled back to the empty case, its glass door yawning open, my name carved beneath like a grave marker. And then something worse happened. I saw movement inside the case. Not mist. Not reflection. But me. My own face stared back at me from within, eyes wide, mouth stretched in a silent scream. My double pressed her palms against the inside of the glass, mimicking the very prisoners I'd seen before. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, her lips trembling, tears streaking down her face. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. "No. That's not me. That's not me." The collector's smile widened. "It's the you that already belongs here. You've been part of the collection since the moment you first heard my name. You felt it, haven't you? The pull. The curiosity. Why else would you come back to this town?" My lungs constricted. He was right. I had told myself it was grief, responsibility, nostalgia that had dragged me back, but deep down, hadn't there always been a whisper, a compulsion, a morbid fascination with the stories my grandmother told? "No," I said again, weakly now, my denial faltering. "I'm not yours." "You were never yours," he said simply. The cavern groaned. The glass hummed. The double inside the empty case began pounding on the walls with desperate fists, her face contorted in agony. My ears rang with the sound, though I knew no sound could truly escape that prison. It wasn't possible. And yet I heard it, the crack of knuckles, the scrape of fingernails splitting against the glass. I clutched my head, dropping to my knees. Stop it, stop it, stop it. The collector crouched beside me, moving with unnatural grace. His shadow swallowed mine, his face so close I could feel the chill radiating from his skin. The sooner you stop resisting, the sooner the pain ends. Step into the glass. Become what you were always meant to be. I will take care of the rest. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears burning hot against my cheeks. When I opened them again, I was no longer on the stone floor. I was standing inside the empty case. The glass door sealed shut with a hiss behind me. And outside, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, was me. For a few agonizing heartbeats, I couldn't tell which side of the glass I was on. My palms pressed against the cold surface, slick with condensation, while my reflection, or my other self, mirrored the same movement. Our eyes locked, wide and desperate. There was no difference between us except for one crucial detail: the version outside looked free, and I was trapped. The air inside the case was heavy, stale, as though it had been sealed for centuries. Each breath came shallow, ragged, like I was inhaling through a straw. The walls curved slightly inward, creating a warped reflection that bent my body into something grotesque. My voice, when I tried to scream, came out as nothing more than a muffled vibration, swallowed by the glass. The other me, the one outside, was pounding on the case now, eyes wild, mouth forming words I couldn't hear. I thought I recognized the shape of them: let me in. Or maybe it was let me out. My brain refused to decide. The collector's pale figure loomed just beyond, his black coat pooling around his feet like liquid shadow. He turned his head slowly, studying the two of us as if we were insects pinned to a board. His smile never faltered. Do you see now? His voice slithered into the case, not muffled by the barrier, as though the glass carried his words straight into my skull. Two sides of the same soul. One preserved, one displayed. Which is the truer you, I wonder? The one who resists, or the one who accepts? I shook my head violently, pressing my fists against the glass. My nails scraped down the inside, leaving no mark, no sound, only a sickening reminder of futility. Panic swelled inside me, but beneath it, horrifyingly, was something else. A numbness. A creeping calm that whispered, "It's easier this way. Stop fighting. Just let go." My grandmother's words came back, desperate and broken: "Never let him speak to you too long. That's how he gets inside." The numbness spread with each syllable of his voice, seeping into me like a poison. Outside, the other me had stopped pounding. She was staring at me now, her face slack with exhaustion, or perhaps resignation. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it flat against the glass. Almost without thinking, I did the same. Our palms met with only a thin sheet between us. And in that moment, I felt it. A pull. Not physical, not visible, but deep in my chest, like an anchor being torn free from the ocean floor. My memories flashed: birthdays, summers by the lake, my grandmother's trembling lullabies, the smell of rain on hot asphalt. They surged toward the other me, pulled through the glass like smoke slipping through cracks. She inhaled sharply, eyes widening, as if drinking me in. No! I tried to scream, but the glass swallowed the sound. The collector tilted his head, eyes glittering. One must remain. One must be displayed. But which one, I wonder? Which will you choose? The pull grew stronger. My limbs felt heavy, sluggish, as though they belonged to someone else. My double outside straightened, her eyes hardening. She looked stronger. More alive. Her lips curved into a small, cruel smile. And I realized with dawning horror, she wasn't begging to be let out. She had been waiting for me to take her place. The glass around me vibrated, a low hum that crawled into my bones. My reflection's mouth moved again, clear this time: "Stay. Stay. Stay." The collector stepped closer, his shadow stretching across both of us. Do you feel it? The decision unraveling? Soon there will be no question. Only the display, and the audience who remembers. My vision blurred. I slammed my fists against the glass again, desperate, but the numbness was winning. My movements slowed, each strike weaker than the last. And then something shifted. From the corner of my eye, I saw her, my grandmother, trapped in a case farther down the row. Her face was drawn, her hair silver, but her eyes blazed with the same fire I remembered from childhood. She shook her head violently, raising her hand, pointing, not at me, but at the collector. My breath caught. She wasn't telling me to surrender. She was telling me to fight. Rage burned through the numbness. My fists clenched until my nails cut into my palms. I glared at the pale monster outside and, though no sound carried through the glass, I mouthed the words with every ounce of fury I had left, "You won't have me." The collector's smile faltered for the first time. The glass around me shuddered, a spider web of faint cracks crawling across its surface. My double smile broke, twisting into something ugly, desperate. She slammed her hands against the glass, her eyes wide with panic now. The hum grew louder, the cavern trembling. Dust rained from the ceiling as the cracks deepened, splitting like veins. And then, with a deafening crack, the glass shattered. Shards exploded outward, the force knocking me to the ground. My ears rang, my skin stung with cuts, but I was free. I gasped for air, sweet and heavy, filling my lungs like water after drowning. When I looked up, my double was gone. But the empty pedestal still bore my name. And the collector was no longer smiling. His eyes had narrowed into pits of pure darkness. "You've made a mistake," he hissed, his voice no longer gentle, but sharp enough to cut. "No one breaks the glass. No one." He stepped forward, coat whipping around him like the wings of a carrion bird. And from every case in the cavern, the trap began to move. Their hands pounded, their mouths screamed silently. The glass shook violently, as though hundreds of prisoners were begging, warning, or trying to break free themselves. The cavern roared with the sound of cracking. And I realized, with a sick jolt of terror, I hadn't escaped the collection. I had broken it. The sound of breaking glass was deafening. It rolled through the cavern like thunder, echoing off the stone walls until it felt like the entire mansion was collapsing on top of me. Shards rained down in glittering sheets, catching the dim light as they fell, slicing the air into ribbons. My arms shielded my face, but tiny cuts still burned across my skin. The cases were breaking. One by one, in rapid succession, the pristine displays that had lined these halls for generations split apart, their perfect surfaces fracturing into jagged wounds. And from within, the prisoners stirred. They didn't move like people. Not at first. Their limbs jerked, stiff from decades of forced stillness. Some collapsed to the floor in heaps, wheezing as though they had forgotten how to breathe. Others staggered upright, their eyes sunken, their mouths opening in silent wails. The air filled with the sound of glass grinding beneath bare feet, a chorus of movement that was neither alive nor dead, but something in between. I scrambled backward, my palms slick with blood, my chest heaving. The cavern had become a graveyard of broken displays, and yet it was no relief, it was worse. These people weren't freed, they were unleashed. The collector's shadow loomed taller as he stepped closer. His smile had vanished, replaced with a snarl that revealed teeth too sharp, too many. The elegance he once carried was gone, he was monstrous now, his coat writhing as if alive, tendrils of black fabric slithering across the ground, tasting the air. "You've doomed them," he hissed, his voice reverberating through my bones. The glass kept them safe. The glass kept them whole. Without it, they are nothing but hunger. I didn't understand what he meant until I saw it. The first of the freed, a man in tattered work clothes, his skin pale and sagging, staggered toward me. His eyes were empty, not pleading but ravenous. His jaw opened far wider than humanly possible, unhinging with a wet crack, revealing a cavern of teeth that hadn't been there before. He lunged. I barely rolled aside in time. His teeth clamped down where my shoulder had been, snapping so hard I could feel the vibration through the stone floor. His body twisted unnaturally as he turned, limbs bending wrong, but still he came at me again, driven by something primal and furious. Another figure joined him, a woman in a faded dress, her hair floating as though underwater. She crawled on all fours, her back arching in sickening angles. Her nails dragged sparks against the stone as she scrambled forward, mouth stretched into a scream that made no sound. I stumbled to my feet and ran, weaving between the staggering, broken figures. Some ignored me, collapsing to the floor in fits of convulsions. Others turned their hollow eyes toward me, following, shuffling, crawling, their bodies cracking with each unnatural movement. The collector did not pursue. He didn't have to. He watched with those black, depthless eyes, his voice booming across the cavern. You think you've escaped me? Foolish child. You've only freed them from me. And they are far worse than I. His laughter followed me as I ran, deeper into the labyrinth of shattered cases. The floor was slick with blood from my cuts, and with something else, something that oozed from the broken displays, a black liquid that smelled of rust and rot. It clung to my shoes, dragging at me, as though the very floor wanted to hold me still. The prisoners were everywhere now. Some crawled along the walls, defying gravity, their mouths gaping wide. Others hung from the ceiling, twitching, their eyes rolling like marbles in cracked sockets. They weren't human anymore, they were remnants of something human, hollowed out and warped by centuries in the collector's glass. I turned a corner and skidded to a halt. There, in the middle of the corridor, stood my grandmother. She was whole, no broken limbs, no hollow eyes. Her silver hair gleamed faintly in the darkness, and her hands were clasped together as though in prayer. For a heartbeat, hope surged in my chest. Grandma? My voice cracked. She lifted her head. Her eyes met mine. They were clear, sharp, filled with the same strength I had seen when she used to tuck me into bed and whisper warnings of the collector. Don't stop, she mouthed. No sound came out, but I could read the words on her lips. Run. Don't stop. I staggered toward her, but before I could reach her, her body convulsed. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as cracks split across her skin like glass shattering from the inside. She raised her hands toward me, desperate, but they burst apart into shards, dissolving into black mist that dissipated into the air. I screamed, stumbling back. My voice was swallowed by the cavern. The collector's laugh rang out again, echoing from all directions. Even the strongest pieces break, child. Nothing lasts forever, except the collection. The prisoners were closing in now, their movements jerky but relentless. I darted through a gap, my body scraping against jagged glass, tearing new wounds into my arms and legs. My breath was ragged, my vision swimming. The cavern twisted, corridors looping into each other until I no longer knew where I was going. And then I saw it. Another staircase, spiraling upward. A faint light glowed at the top, not the cold, artificial glow of the glass, but something warmer, almost natural. My heart leapt. Maybe it was a way out. I forced my legs to move, pushing through the sea of broken prisoners, their hands clawing at my clothes, their mouths snapping inches from my face. I climbed, step after step, lungs burning, until at last I reached the top. The door was heavy wood, iron-banded, scarred with age. My hands shook as I pushed it open, the hinges screaming in protest. Beyond it was not freedom. It was a room. And every wall was covered in mirrors. Not cases, not glass displays. Mirrors. Each one reflected me, but not as I was. In some, I looked older. In others, younger. Some versions smiled with bloody teeth, others wept, others stood still with eyes black as the collector's. Dozens of me. Hundreds. And in the center of the room, standing before the largest mirror, was the collector himself. He raised his hand. Every reflection raised theirs in perfect unison. Welcome home, he whispered. The door slammed shut behind me with a hollow boom, the sound vibrating through the room as if the mirrors themselves had absorbed it. My body froze. I didn't turn, didn't dare look away from the impossible sight surrounding me. The walls were nothing but glass, seamless panes stretching from floor to ceiling, each reflecting me in terrible variations. Some of the faces were familiar, me as I was now, bloodied and terrified. But others should not have existed. One mirror showed me with hollow sockets where my eyes should be, black streams trickling down my cheeks. Another showed me smiling, but my lips kept stretching, tearing until my mouth split from ear to ear. In another, I stood tall and unbroken, dressed in fine clothing, calm and collected, watching me with cold disdain as though I were the distorted reflection. The air in the room was heavy, pressing against my chest. Every breath fogged the mirrors in front of me, but the reflections breathed differently, delayed, or not at all. I moved my hand, trembling, and a dozen versions moved in sync. But a dozen more did not. Some stood frozen, watching me with their heads cocked at unnatural angles. At the center of it all was the largest mirror, a monstrous slab of polished glass framed in black iron. It was taller than the collector himself, who now stood before it, his long coat pooling at his feet. His pale hand rested against the surface, and his reflection did not mimic him, it stared back with a hunger so intense it made bile rise in my throat. "You think you broke free," the collector said, his voice carrying easily in the suffocating air. "But freedom is an illusion. You've only stepped deeper into the frame." I shook my head, forcing my voice to cut through the dread thickening in my chest. "I'm not yours. You can't keep me here." The collector's lips curled into a smile, thin and sharp. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the massive mirror. "Then tell me," he whispered, "which one is you?" The room seemed to tilt. My reflections shifted, their movements jarring, each one slightly out of step with the others. The distorted versions pressed closer to the surface of their mirrors, their hands smearing against the glass as though trying to break through. Some whispered silently, lips moving in frantic pleas. Others sneered, their faces twisting with malice. I stumbled backward, colliding with a mirror behind me. The surface was warm, not cold like glass should be, and it pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something alive. My distorted reflection there leaned forward, placing its forehead against mine through the glass. Its lips moved slowly, deliberately, "Stay with me." I tore myself away, bile stinging my throat. My footsteps left bloody smears on the black stone floor, but the reflections left no marks at all. They simply watched. Always watching. The collector's voice threaded through the room like smoke. "Every soul fractures. Every life contains infinite versions. When I take someone, I do not collect their body. I collect their possibilities." I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the mirrors leaning toward me, pressing closer, each reflection more eager, more desperate. "This is why they never leave," he continued. "Because they can't decide which self is real. They tear themselves apart trying to remember. Trying to choose." I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to look. But even with my eyelids pressed tight, I saw them, the infinite me's, burned into the inside of my skull like afterimages of the sun. Smiling, screaming, rotting, laughing. They weren't just reflections. They were possibilities of who I might become, or who I already was. The collector's voice dropped lower, intimate, like a whisper pressed directly against my ear. "Do you want to know a secret, child? A truth your grandmother never told you?" My chest heaved, my fingernails biting into my palms. Against every instinct, I opened my eyes. The collector leaned close to the great mirror. His reflection leaned too, but its lips were moving faster, whispering something different. He smiled wider. "You've been here before." The words gutted me. "No," my voice broke. "That's not true." He spread his arms, coat unfurling like wings, and all the mirrors shook violently. The reflections banged against their surfaces, mouths opening in screams I couldn't hear. My distorted selves clawed, slammed, twisted against the glass, each one fighting to get out, to take my place. "Yes," the collector hissed. "Why do you think the door closed so easily? Why do you think your reflection waited? Because you are not new to this place. You are part of it. You are already mine." The mirror behind me cracked. I spun, horrified, as my reflection pressed its hand through the fissure. Its skin was gray, veins black, its smile razor-thin. Shards of glass rained down, cutting my arms as it forced itself halfway through, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. I stumbled toward the center of the room, toward the collector himself, not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. The reflections were breaking free, crawling out, their distorted laughter filling the air though no sound should exist here. The collector placed his hand against the great mirror again, his voice rising above the chaos. "Choose," he thundered. "Which version of you will take the glass? Which will stand on the pedestal? Choose, or they will all take you." The great mirror shuddered, the surface rippling like water. My reflection there, perfectly me, no distortions, stepped forward from the other side, pressing her hand to the glass. Her eyes were calm, steady, filled with something that almost looked like pity. The room shook violently. The walls groaned. Shards of broken mirrors poured across the floor like glittering rivers. The distorted versions shrieked and laughed, their mouths opening impossibly wide as they dragged themselves free. And the perfect me, my truest self, or perhaps my cruelest, was whispering silently through the mirror. "Come home." The glass beneath my feet cracked with every step, a mosaic of fractured reflections spreading outward like veins of lightning. The air was alive with whispers, my own voices, multiplied and twisted, overlapping in an endless, maddening chorus. Some pleaded. Some mocked. Some promised relief if only I gave in. But the one standing in the largest mirror remained silent. She looked exactly like me, no hollow eyes, no torn smile, no distortions. Her chest rose and fell with calm breaths, her hands steady where mine trembled. She was whole. Her silence was worse than the others. The collector loomed at her side, pale hand resting lightly against the glass. His eyes glowed faintly, twin orbs of black fire that swallowed the light. "You see it, don't you?" he murmured. "The truest you. Unbroken. Untouched by fear. All you must do is step forward. The glass will open, and you will take her place. She will bear the weight of the collection, and you will finally be free." Free. The words slithered through my mind like a drug, sweet and poisonous all at once. My body ached with exhaustion, blood slick on my arms and legs from countless cuts. Every muscle screamed to rest, to collapse, to surrender. If this version of me, the calm one, could bear the weight, why shouldn't I let her? I staggered a step closer to the great mirror. My reflection's hand pressed more firmly against the surface, her lips moving in that same soundless plea, "Come home." But then I noticed something. Her eyes. At first glance they were steady, reassuring. But as I drew nearer, I saw the faintest flicker in them, a glimmer like a flame smothered under glass. Not calmness, containment. Not serenity, resignation. She wasn't free. She was trapped. The realization hit like a blade between my ribs. This wasn't my salvation. This was my replacement. The collector must have seen the shift in my face, because his smile sharpened, stretching too wide, his teeth catching the dim light like shards of glass. "Don't fight it, child. You've fought long enough. Even your grandmother couldn't resist in the end. You saw her crack. You saw her dissolve." My knees weakened. The memory of her shattering replayed in brutal clarity, her face contorting, her body splitting apart like fragile porcelain. If she hadn't been strong enough, what chance did I have? The mirrors around me groaned, fissures splitting wider as distorted versions of myself clawed their way free. One dragged itself across the floor, its legs bent backward, arms reaching for me with skeletal fingers. Another clung to the ceiling like an insect, saliva dripping from its unnaturally wide mouth. They were converging, their hunger unmistakable. "Choose," the collector bellowed, his voice rattling the glass. "Choose, or you will be torn apart by your own discarded selves. The fragments of you that should never have existed. Do you want them to wear your skin?" My chest heaved. My hand trembled as I raised it, almost against my will, toward the perfect reflection. her face lit with relief, her lips curving into a soft, pitying smile. She reached back, ready to pull me in. And then I remembered the pedestal. I remembered my name carved into the stone, etched beneath the empty case where I was meant to stand. If I stepped into that mirror, if I allowed this perfect version to take my place, the glass would be whole again. The collection would continue. I wouldn't be free, I would simply vanish, replaced by a lie. No, I whispered, though my voice was barely audible over the cacophony of shattering glass. Louder this time, I forced the word out with all the air in my lungs. No. The collector's eyes narrowed. His hand pressed harder against the mirror, the surface rippling like water under his touch. My reflection's smile faltered, her expression shifting into something sharper, more desperate. She pounded her palm against the glass, and for the first time, sound leaked through, a muffled thud, a faint echo of her voice. Please. The desperation in that one word nearly broke me. I staggered back, shaking, my hands clutching my skull as the whispers of my distorted selves swelled into a deafening roar. My vision blurred, the room spinning. Every reflection screamed or laughed or sobbed, their voices overlapping until I could no longer tell which were theirs and which were mine. And then, silence. The collector had raised his hand. The distorted versions froze, suspended in mid-crawl, mid-laugh, mid-lunge. Even the air seemed to stop moving. His eyes burned brighter, and his voice came soft, low, cutting through the silence like a knife. You think you've escaped the case. You think breaking the glass freed you. But you are still inside, child. You always have been. His pale finger tapped against the surface of the great mirror. The sound echoed unnaturally, resonating in my bones. Look closer. Against every instinct, I did. And I saw it. The reflection in the great mirror wasn't standing on the other side. She wasn't reaching through. She wasn't waiting for me to switch places. I was the one behind the glass. The room around me tilted. My stomach lurched, bile burning the back of my throat. No matter how I moved, how I staggered backward, the reflection in the mirror mimicked me perfectly, and I was the one pounding against the surface, desperate to get out. The collector's smile returned, wider than ever. There is no outside. There never was. The floor cracked beneath me, the stone splitting like brittle bone. The mirrors along the walls shattered all at once, raining shards that never touched the ground. They hung suspended in the air, spinning, reflecting infinite versions of me from every angle. Some screamed. Some reached for me. Some smiled, their eyes filled with pity or malice. And in that infinite storm of broken selves, one truth settled like a stone in my chest. I hadn't escaped the collection. I was still in it. The silence after the shattering was worse than the screams. The shards floated in midair like stars suspended in a black void, each one catching the faint light and reflecting 1,000 distorted versions of me. The room was gone, or rather, the room had dissolved into something endless, a liminal nowhere that stretched beyond sight. I stood, or thought I stood, on nothing at all. Beneath my feet there was no stone, no floor, only the illusion of solidness, as if the glass itself was pretending to hold me up. The collector was no longer bound to a single figure. He appeared in every shard, his pale face multiplied into infinity. In one reflection, his grin was sharp and gleaming. In another, he loomed taller than the mirror itself, his eyes bottomless voids. In others, he appeared thinner, smaller, stretched into grotesque parodies of himself. But everywhere I looked, he was there. Watching. Waiting. You understand now, don't you? His voice didn't come from one mouth but from all of them, layered over itself in 100 pitches and tones. The collection is not the cases. Not the glass. It is this. His pale hand stretched outward, and the shards quivered in the air, spinning faster. It is the endless web of selves you've abandoned, broken, denied. Each piece preserved, each possibility frozen. Do you think you are any different? My throat closed, choking off breath. I staggered back, but there was nowhere to go. My reflections followed in the shards, every angle showing me twisted in new, terrifying ways. One smiled sweetly even as blood poured from her eyes. Another clawed at her own skin, peeling it off strip by strip, her grin never faltering. Yet another stood silently with her hands folded, calm and composed, watching me as though I were the aberration. I never took you, the collector continued. You placed yourself here the moment you chose survival over truth. You've lived in glass since the first time you lied to yourself. Since the first time you hid from who you could become. I merely kept you polished. The words sank into me like hooks, dragging up memories I wanted buried, the night I lied to my grandmother about hearing whispers in the dark, the times I'd ignored the pull of something unseen because it was easier to pretend it wasn't there. Every denial, every compromise, every moment of weakness. Each one had carved a new reflection, a new possibility. And now they were all here, screaming for a turn to be real. The air quivered. The shards spun faster, swirling into a cyclone of broken glass around me. My distorted selves leapt from shard to shard, crawling like insects across the fractured surfaces, their faces pressed against the edges as though the glass were thin as paper. Their mouths open in unison. Let us in. The storm of voices crushed me, pressing against my skull until I thought it would crack open. I clutched my head, falling to my knees, blood dripping from fresh cuts as shards grazed my skin. The reflections leaned closer, their hands reaching. I felt the press of fingers against my shoulders, my arms, my face, though there was no one there. The touch was cold, sticky, hungry. Choose, the collector whispered, though now his voice was quieter, more intimate, threading itself inside my skull. Choose which version of you will remain. Choose who will be displayed, so the others may rest. Or they will all consume you, and nothing will remain at all. The cyclone slowed. The shards began to peel apart, arranging themselves into a ring around me. Each shard hovered, upright like a thin, jagged mirror. Each one held a different version of me, staring out with wild eyes, patient smiles, or gaping maws. A gallery of horrors. I stumbled to my feet, surrounded on all sides. One reflection spoke first. Her lips moved in perfect sync with my own voice, though I hadn't opened my mouth. Pick me, she said softly. She looked strong, unscarred, her eyes steady. I'll bear it. You don't have to suffer anymore. Another shard rattled violently, its reflection slamming her palms against the surface. Her teeth were broken, her hair matted with blood, but her grin was manic with determination. No. Me. I'm the fighter. The survivor. I'll kill him if I have to, just let me out. The calm one folded her hands neatly, tilting her head. Don't listen to her. Strength is useless without resolve. You need me. You know you do. Others shouted, screamed, begged, all clamoring over each other until the sound became unbearable. I spun in circles, my pulse pounding in my ears, my vision swimming. The collector's pale figure drifted around the edge of the ring, his coat dragging through the void like oil spreading on water. He watched with delight, his smile returning, wider than ever. This is what you are, he whispered. 1,000 fragments, none whole, none true. You are always going to end here, child. Because there is no one real you. There is only the collection. The shards trembled violently, the air vibrating with their hunger. One by one, the reflections began slamming their palms against the glass, harder, harder, until cracks spiderwebbed across their surfaces. Splinters flew. Pieces rained down. And then, one shard shattered completely. The reflection within didn't vanish. She spilled out, crawling onto the void, her body twisting unnaturally as she dragged herself toward me. Her smile was feral, her eyes burning with wild light. And behind her, other shards began to crack. They weren't waiting for me to choose anymore. They were choosing themselves. The first reflection dragged herself fully free of the shard, her limbs bending wrong, her spine arching in jerks. Her fingernails scraped sparks across the nothing floor as she crawled toward me, teeth bared in a grin so wide it seemed her face might split apart. Behind her, another shard cracked open, spilling a second version of me, this one sobbing uncontrollably, her hands clutching at her chest as if she couldn't bear to hold herself together. Then another emerged, her body stiff, movements mechanical, as if she were a puppet on invisible strings. One by one, they came. The circle of mirrors was collapsing, each shard splintering under the weight of desperation, until dozens of versions of me clawed their way into the void. Some rushed forward with open arms, begging to be embraced. Others staggered and screamed, their eyes hollow black pits. Others crawled with insect-like grace, bodies twitching, jaws snapping. They weren't phantoms anymore. They were flesh. I stumbled back, blood dripping into my eyes, every muscle screaming with exhaustion. But there was nowhere to run. The void stretched endlessly, but the swarm was faster, closing in from all sides. Their hands reached for me, clammy and ice-cold, their nails digging into my skin as though I were nothing more than another reflection to be dragged into the glass. Stop! My scream tore from my throat, raw and desperate, but they didn't stop. The collector drifted behind them, untouched by their frenzy. His pale face was calm again, his grin returning like a mask. He moved slowly, hands folded behind his back as though strolling through a gallery, admiring his pieces. "This is what it means," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly above the chaos. "You are not whole. You never were. You are 1,000 broken selves, each demanding to be real. Do you see now why I collect? Do you see why I keep them behind glass?" One reflection lunged at me, her nails digging into my shoulder. She was me, exactly me, but her face twisted with animal rage. I shoved her back, my arm slick with blood where her nails had torn through flesh. Another seized my leg, her mouth clamping onto my calf with a sickening crunch. Pain shot through me, white-hot, and I kicked her away, my scream strangled in my throat. Still they came. The sobbing one threw herself into my arms, clinging to me with suffocating strength. "I can't," she wept, her voice identical to mine. "I can't hold it anymore. You take it, you take it." Her grip was iron. I shoved her back with all my strength, but she clawed my shirt, tearing fabric and skin alike, her face twisted with desperation. More piled on. Some laughed in my ear. Some bit into my arms. Some whispered softly, almost kindly, as if they pitied me even while they tore at me. I was drowning in myself, drowning in a tide of broken, fractured versions clawing for dominance. The collector's voice deepened, resonating through the void like a tolling bell. "Choose, child. Choose which self will stand. If you don't, they will all devour you. And when you are gone, I will polish what remains." "I can't." My voice cracked, my chest heaving. "They're all me, I can't." The collector tilted his head. His smile softened, cruel and pitying. "Then you were never real to begin with." The words shattered something inside me. Rage surged, burning away fear for one wild heartbeat. My bloodied fists clenched. If every one of these fragments was me, if they all wanted to take me, then maybe I didn't need to choose. Maybe I could take them. I roared, shoving outward with all my strength. The sobbing version fell away. The biting version released with a shriek. I swung my fists wildly, bone crunching under impact as another staggered back, blood streaming from her nose, my nose. The reflections reeled, their screams filling the void, but more surged forward to take their place. "You can't fight them," the collector crooned, drifting closer, his black eyes glowing. "You can't kill yourself 1,000 times. You can only surrender." But I didn't surrender. I fought. I tore free from the swarm, my body a mass of cuts, bruises, blood. My chest felt like it would split open, my lungs raw from screaming. I ran through the void, but the reflections followed, swarming behind me, their voices overlapping into a storm of madness. And then, there it was. In the distance, cutting through the dark, stood a single shard. It was whole, unbroken, gleaming faintly with light that wasn't cold or cruel but warm, almost alive. Within it stood a reflection I barely recognized, me, younger, eyes filled with defiance, lips pressed in a stubborn line. The child I had once been, the one who had first heard my grandmother's warnings, the one who had sworn never to be caught. She wasn't begging. She wasn't smiling. She was standing strong, hand pressed to the glass, waiting. The reflection shrieked louder, furious, desperate. The collector hissed, his calm finally breaking, his voice sharp as knives. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare!" I lunged for the shard, slamming my bloodied hand against the surface. The younger me pressed back instantly, eyes locking onto mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw clarity. Not pity. Not hunger. Not despair. Just strength. The glass burned beneath my palm, light searing into my flesh, flooding through my veins like fire. The swarm howled, clawing at me, but the warmth spread faster, brighter, until their hands slipped away as if they couldn't bear to touch me anymore. The collector screamed. A raw, inhuman sound that rattled the void and cracked the remaining shards. His coat whipped violently, shadows tearing away from him like smoke. His eyes burned brighter, but beneath them, for the first time, I saw something else. Fear. The light from the shards surged outward, shattering more of the void, consuming the swarm of reflections. They twisted and shrieked, dissolving into dust, their voices vanishing into silence. The warmth enveloped me, brighter, stronger, until there was nothing left but blinding white. And then, silence. I was alone. But the shards still pulsed beneath my hand. And the voice of the younger me echoed softly in my head. Now you know the truth. But can you carry it? The white light faded slowly, like the aftermath of lightning behind closed eyes. My breath came ragged, shallow, every muscle trembling as though I had carried the weight of 1,000 bodies on my back. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing on solid ground again, not stone, not void, but something that looked eerily familiar. It was my grandmother's house. The old wallpaper, peeling at the corners. The scent of cedar and dust. The crooked rug at the entryway, the one she always insisted on straightening though it never stayed flat. My chest ached as I looked around, memories surging back with an almost painful clarity. This was where the stories had been told, where I had first heard of the collector. But it wasn't right. The colors were too muted, the air too heavy, as though the house were only a memory rendered in dull paint. The windows showed no outside world, only blank gray light, thick and unmoving. And in the parlor, where my grandmother's rocking chair once sat, stood the collector. He was different now. No longer distant and calm, no longer grinning with that mocking serenity. His body flickered, unstable, his coat unraveling into strands of smoke that curled and dissolved in the still air. His face shifted from pale flesh to shadow and back again, as though he couldn't hold himself together. But his eyes were fixed on me with searing hatred. "You weren't supposed to make it this far," he said, his voice ragged, stripped of its elegance. It was deeper, rawer, as if dozens of voices fought for dominance beneath one throat. "You were supposed to drown in yourself. To be displayed, polished, admired. Like all the others." My hand still tingled with the warmth from the shard, though the glass was gone now. It pulsed faintly in my veins, a thin ember glowing in my chest. "You're afraid," I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "That's why you keep them in glass. Because if they ever escaped..." His face twisted, half smile, half snarl. "Do you think they would stay? Do you think they would forgive? No, child. They would tear this world apart. Then what are you?" My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "You said you collect. You said you polish. But you're not a man. You never were." The collector's body rippled. The smoke that made up his coat thickened, spreading outward until the entire parlor dimmed. The walls bent and warped, stretching like fabric under pressure. His grin widened again, but it was warped now, jagged, splitting too far across his face. "I am the caretaker," he hissed. "The warden of what humanity refuses to face. Every lie, every denial, every secret version of yourself you could not bear, I kept them. I fed them. Without me, you would be consumed by the weight of your own lives. I am mercy." No, my voice trembled, but I gripped the ember in my chest tighter, refusing to look away. You're not mercy. You're a prison. He lunged forward, faster than sight, and suddenly he was inches from me, his face twisting through a dozen versions, young, old, monstrous, skeletal, before settling again on the pale mask I had come to fear. His breath was cold as he leaned close. "And what do you think you are?" he whispered. "You've been in my collection longer than you know. Every time you lied, every time you denied, every time you chose silence over truth, you were mine. You were glass long before you found my house. You think you broke free? No. You are just another shard. Another fragment I allowed to play pretend." My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. His words sank deep, pulling at every memory I'd tried to ignore. The nights I pretended I didn't hear whispers in the dark. The days I swallowed back words instead of speaking. The promises I made and broke, even to myself. Was I truly free, or was I only another reflection he had polished and placed for display? The ember in my chest flickered, dimming as doubt seeped in. The collector saw it. His grin returned, cruel and triumphant. "Yes. That's it. You feel it, don't you? The fracture. The split. You cannot deny me, child. You are mine. You have always been mine." The walls of the house cracked, splitting like shattered mirrors. Hands pressed through the fractures, hundreds of them, pale and trembling. Faces followed, distorted, screaming silently, their mouths wide. The gallery was returning. The broken reflections had found the cracks and were pushing through, filling the parlor with their desperate wails. I stumbled back, clutching my chest, the ember flickering wildly. My grandmother's rocking chair cracked and splintered under the weight of pale arms reaching through it. The rug rippled as if alive, shifting beneath my feet. The collector straightened, smoke billowing outward like a storm, his body growing taller, broader, until he loomed over me, his head brushing the ceiling. His voice thundered now, shaking the house to its foundation. "You cannot escape the collection. You cannot escape me. You never left, child. You never left at all." The gray light outside the windows darkened, black seeping in until nothing remained. The parlor melted around us, wallpaper sloughing off like wet paper, the floor sagging and groaning. The house was dissolving into the same void where it had all begun. And the faces, my faces, were climbing through the cracks, pouring into the collapsing room. They swarmed toward me again, their screams overlapping until they became one unbearable sound. The ember in my chest pulsed weakly, like the final heartbeat of something about to die. But even in that storm of terror, one voice echoed faintly in my skull. The younger me, the child in the shard. "Now you know the truth. But can you carry it?" I staggered, bloodied and gasping, as the collector's shadow towered over me and the swarm closed in. The ember burned hotter, brighter, as if demanding an answer. I clenched my fists, forcing air into my lungs. My voice cracked, but I shouted into the darkness anyway. "I won't be collected." The ember erupted. The ember in my chest exploded into fire. It wasn't the consuming fire of destruction, but something purer, sharper, cutting through the void with blinding clarity. Heat surged down my arms, flooding my veins, burning away the icy grip of the reflections as they clawed at me. Their fingers cracked and crumbled to dust when they touched the light. Their screams pitched higher, breaking into shrill fragments before dissolving into silence. The collector staggered back, his massive body of smoke writhing and unraveling like ash caught in a gale. His grin faltered, then twisted into something uglier, less human. His voice came in waves, 1,000 overlapping tones, each one cracking under strain. "No, you are not meant to hold it. You are glass, you are mine." But I wasn't glass anymore. The ember seared through me, knitting every fracture, silencing every echo of false selves. For the first time, I felt whole, or at least closer to it than I ever had before. My skin glowed faintly in the endless dark, a fragile beacon against the storm. The reflections shrieked louder, surging in a final desperate wave, their mouths wide with hunger. Some begged, some cursed me, others whispered promises of power if I let them take my place. But the fire flared brighter, and they disintegrated before they could reach me, scattering into glittering motes that drifted upward like fading stars. The collector roared, his body convulsing. His face stretched into dozens of others, faces I recognized now. The missing townsfolk. The vanished children. My grandmother. They all flashed across his surface, mouths open in silent screams, their eyes pleading as if trapped within him. He wasn't just the keeper of fragments. He was built out of them. Every soul he collected became part of his form, his prison of flesh and shadow. "You think you've won?" he hissed, his voice ragged, bleeding fury. "You think you are free? Foolish child. The shard you touched, it was mine. I let you find it. I let you believe you had power. You are still in the collection. You always were. This fire you wield, it is just another illusion. Another display." The words hit me like blows, doubt clawing back into my chest. The ember flickered, shuddering under the weight of his voice. What if he was right? What if this fire wasn't freedom, but just another form of glass, another lie he had crafted to keep me docile? The house collapsed fully, swallowed into the void. There was nothing now but him and me, his towering form of shadow and faces, and the embers glow trembling within me. "You are a reflection," he whispered, lowering his head until his vast, featureless face loomed inches from mine. "You never left the case. This struggle, this fight, it is only the story you tell yourself to keep from shattering. You are my favorite piece, because you still believe." His grin returned, vast and jagged, stretching wider than human jaws should. And in that moment, I understood the true horror. What if the collector didn't just keep fragments? What if he let them believe they had escaped, let them build entire lives, entire stories, only to watch them realize, in the end, that they were never free? That their resistance, their rage, their desperate clawing for freedom was nothing more than another layer of the collection, another exquisite display of suffering? What if I was still behind the glass? The ember blazed hotter, as if rebelling against the thought. But its heat felt thinner now, less certain, as though it, too, was questioning its own reality. I fell to my knees, clutching my chest, torn between fire and shadow. The collector's laugh filled the void, deep and endless, vibrating through my bones until I thought they might crack. "You see it now. The truth. There is no outside. There is no freedom. There is only me. There is only the collection." The faces on his body screamed in unison, their cries folding over each other until they became the same voice, my own voice, multiplied 1,000 times. I was surrounded by myself, screaming at myself, trapped inside myself. The ember flared one last time, bursting outward in a wave of light so blinding it erased everything, the collector, the faces, even the void. I couldn't tell if I had destroyed him or if he had simply let me believe I had. I couldn't tell if I was free, or if this too was part of the glass, another illusion crafted for display. When the light dimmed, I was standing in silence. A room surrounded me, small, square, and lined with walls of glass. Inside each case, a figure stood frozen. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. All of them bore the same expression, a mix of terror and denial. I turned, heart pounding, and saw the reflection in the glass. It was me. But I wasn't moving. My body stood there, frozen, eyes wide, mouth parted in a scream that never ended. The fire in my chest had gone out. The warmth was gone. Only the reflection of myself remained, perfectly preserved, polished and flawless, just another piece in the endless gallery. And somewhere in the unseen dark, I heard the collector's voice, calm once more, whispering with satisfaction. "Every collection needs a centerpiece.